Good day, everyone. Well, today's going to be a very special video because we're going to take this recent release from AK Interactive 1972 T2 van, and we're going to take it from start to finish, opening up the box, taking a look at some of these parts right off the bat here. And now let's start with the construction. Construction begins pretty much where you would expect it, and that would be on the lower hull, the chassis, and suspension. There also is an engine that can be seen in the final presentation if you choose to open the rear engine hatch. And during the construction here, I'll go ahead and paint out the interior as well because, well, there's some great views through the large window at the front of the van. And as long as I have some paint loaded up on my airbrush, I'll go ahead and add some base colors to the exterior as well. This is all being done using AK Real Colors. On some of these smaller details, I'll just go ahead and pull out the markers for those, just add the splash of color that's required, install them, very quick, very easy, no mess, no cleanup, and I'm really able to move along very, very quickly here with the construction. And so goes the back and forth process of painting and constructing here. This happens to be the seats, just add a splash of color here using the AK Generation 3 colors. And then we'll start installing those and we'll be able to finally button this thing up. We've already completed the dashboard. I did that a little bit off camera. And here we are. It's a nice looking little van. And again, it all fits together. This is all just pressure fit at the moment. No glue even required. Now I'm getting ready to start with the decals, and there's quite a few markings to come. I'm going to do something a little bit out of the ordinary here. I'm going to give this a layer of gloss varnish. Doing that for a couple of reasons. First, because I have so many markings going on, I want some ease of being able to kind of slide them around over the surface and get them in the proper location. And secondly, as you can see, I've had to do quite a bit of masking on this to paint out that trim section there, that little stripe. And I just wanted the tape to adhere to the surface nice and tight and not pull off any of the paint. So there you go. Now onto the markings. And now let's take a look at some of the tools that we'll be using. Of course, we start with some clean water. This can be from the tap. I also use my X-Acto knife with a clean blade, maybe a small pair of scissors. These are used to cut the decals away from the backing paper, some tweezers, a clean brush, and perhaps a Q-tip, and then maybe some paper towel to wick off extra moisture. And we'll also be using decal adapter. And just a preview so we know where we're going, we'll take a look at the color plates. And as you can see, it's very vibrant, very colorful, a lot of decals to put into place. Let's start off here. First, we take our decal, we've cut it away from the backing paper, close to the decal, cut off any excess, dip it in some water, lay it onto the paper towel, allow the excess moisture to wick off, and in a few minutes, the decal will become separated from the backing film. Once the decal easily slides off the backing film, we can apply it directly onto the model. Slide out the film from behind, and now our decal is on the surface. Now, very carefully, we can move the decal from left to right or up and down in order to get it to the proper position. With the decal in place, next thing to do is to remove or squeeze out all the excess water and any air bubbles from behind the decals. For that, I'll be using the soft brush. You can also use a Q-tip or cotton swab to do the same task. Another quick glance at the references, and we can see there's a lot of decals that go into a very small space, making placement, the proper placement, very critical. In situations such as this, I like to try to find an anchor point or a reference point. And on this particular model, well, this red logo goes directly over the rear fender. Once this is in the proper placement, then I can reference the other decals around it. This decal is ready to go, so first I moisten the surface with water, and then I slide the decal onto the surface, trying to be as accurate and as close to the final destination as possible. And now I can carefully manipulate the decal and get it into exactly the proper position. The last step is to give it a quick wash with the decal adapter solution to help lock it into place. This is then set aside to dry for a few moments before moving on. Let's move on to the next decal. Now this decal is rather simple, it's just a flat decal, so we'll prepare by moistening the surface with water and then sliding the decal onto the side of the model. Now all the guesswork is taken out of the actual placement because we've already placed that rectangular logo over the rear fender. That helps me with the proper height and alignment and distance along the side of the van here. Alignment of this logo, well, it's taken a little extra time just to get it nice and straight. And for that, I'm using just the tip of my tweezers, just the slightest of pressure, just to kind of gently nudge and move the decal into the proper alignment. And then once I have it in the right place, next step is, of course, we'll use the decal adapter to set it all in place for final presentation. Now, this last decoration on the van is maybe the most challenging of them all. We have this cartoon character. And he's rather large, which presents not much of a problem. He does, however, have this periscope, which makes a long, thin part of the decal that sticks out. And this can be very fragile and susceptible for ripping and tearing. And the part that's going to make this a little bit more difficult is that trim stripe around the van. Well, that has some contour to it. So this is not a flat surface. So we'll have to help the decal conform to the contours of the van itself. Just take your time here. Carefully move things back and forth as need be in order to get to the proper placement. You're not in a hurry. And if things get a little bit sticky, you can add just a little bit more water just to help float that over the surface. Once again, I'll be using the tips of my tweezers, maybe the tip of my X-Acto knife, just to kind of gently nudge and pull and push the decal into the proper position, being very careful not to rip or tear it. It's just the slightest of pressure. Once I have it in the proper place, I can take my cotton swab, or in this case, my dry brush, and squeeze out all the extra moisture underneath and air bubbles and help conform around some of those details of the van itself. Moving over to the opposite side of the van, this has its own unique challenges in that there's a sliding door on the side here. Now, generally that might not be a problem if the logo or the decals were already split on the decal sheet, but in this case, they're not. So we'll have to do some cutting of ourselves. So what I've done is just take a look at the decals, where the placements are in terms of where the splits might be along the door line. And I'm using a sharp blade and cutting the decal directly onto the backing paper. Now, it's just a matter of taking the two halves of this logo and starting to apply them in the proper position, getting them lined up to the edges of the door, both in front and behind the brake. And regardless of the type of decals that we're using, we go back to our normal process here, the normal procedure, which is to pull and push the decals into the proper position using the tip of the knife or maybe the tweezers, get it ready to go. And then the final step will be a wash of the decal adapter solution to permanently set it all in place. Allow this to dry, and then we can continue marking this side of the van as well. One final step, and this is an optional step, totally your preference. In my personal modeling, I've either done it or not done it on models. This kind of depends on the situation, but that would be the top coat. Now, the top coat is there to help protect the decals from any damage, maybe through handling, and it also tends to help unify the decals with the rest of the finish. Special thank you to all my amazing Patreon members for your incredible support. Your contributions help me continue to create content for this channel. If you're not already a member, I invite you to join our Patreon community. As a member, you'll gain access to exclusive behind-the-scenes content, early releases, and more. I hope you'll consider joining Patreon and supporting this channel. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to construction. A few last details here, and we'll be able to complete the construction and markings part of this build. The real color markers, once again, to the rescue here to make really quick work of adding the color to the rubber parts of the tire, to the rims. The chrome part to the wheels is done with the chrome pins. Let's move on to weathering. So once again, moving back into my comfort zone, I'm going to be using oil paints for the majority of the weathering here. I think almost all of it, actually. But the oil paints, I'm not going to apply them using a brush. Rather, I'm going to go ahead and use them with the airbrush. So I start out with some thinner in my cup, add just a nice little dollop of the oil colors into the cup, mix it around, and now I can just mist on some very light coats of the oil paint, looking kind of to build up that dusty, grimy appearance. Oh, and speaking of those colors, in case you might have missed it, the first color that I used was from the 502 Abtalong range, the dust color. And now I'm going to follow that with Starship Filth. Now this is a darker gray, grimy color. Maybe we should call it road grime or something like that, but it's a perfect darker color just to really, again, build up that grimy type of appearance overall. And once again, just a light misting, so it's diluted quite a bit here. So I don't know what the ratio is. I add some thinner, add some paint, and then I apply it. So I'm not too concerned about the ratios. I'm more concerned about just how it looks on the surface. So probably about right now, you're asking yourself, hey, I wonder why Rick used oil paints instead of, say, enamels or acrylics to add this layer of grime here. Well, maybe twofold. First, I like using oil paints. I'm very comfortable with them. I like the way that I can manipulate them. And again, it's just kind of my security blanket. Secondly, and this is Can do this with enamels as well, but I find them easy to work with after the fact. So in this case, I have my grime everywhere across the model, just a light coat. And now I can use a clean brush moistened with thinner, and I can remove areas very, very easily. I have a long working time here, so I can go around the van once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, clean off certain sections here. I can add some streaks. I can add some buildup here and there, and just start really dialing these colors in to how I want them. I can add more colors over the top, redo the process over and over again. So very forgiving, long periods of time in terms of working time in order just to kind of, just like I said, to kind of dial it in and get it right. So after a bit of manipulation using the clean brush on the sprayed on oil paints, and quite honestly, I could stop right here and it'd be just fine, but you know me, I can't quite leave well enough alone. I just wanted to kind of add a little more personality to this van here. So this guy's been a real workhorse here day after day, driving up and down the streets, going to people trying to fix their TVs and their radios and such. So we're gonna he's been beat up a little bit, let's put it that way. And to create these effects, well, I'm going to go back again using the oil paints, but a more traditional application method, applying the paints directly onto the surface, not spraying this time, but using a paintbrush, and then diffusing them back using a clean brush. So in this way, I can just concentrate on localized areas, adding some little nuanced areas of, say, build up dirt and grime, or even some rust effects here and there, and change the color panels slightly, just add a little bit of tonal variation to some of those blues and such, just to bring a little more personality for this guy, just to bring him to life a little bit, give him some, like I said, some wear and tear a bit. And so this technique of adding the oils using just the paintbrush goes on and around. We'll go around the van once, twice, maybe 3 times. Every time getting to a spot, taking a look at it, seeing where we're at, adding a little bit more here, taking off a little bit over there, just to try to get some balance. And we're kind of like telling a story here. So where would the grime and the dirt build up? Where would be a spot where maybe they rubbed up against the van often, so it's a little bit more clean? You know, just try to tell these little bit of stories. I got some rust. I've added some rust to the fenders, so this guy's not very good at parallel parking, apparently. So anyway, just have fun with it. I think I'm going to call this one done. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and call this one done here. I hope you've enjoyed this little bit longer tutorial, especially about the decals and such. Until the next time, here are some final photographs. If you like this channel, please hit that like and subscribe. I do have a Patreon page if you'd like to see more of this type of information. Until the next time, everybody, take care and happy modeling.